Hello and
Oh,
welcome to Down to the Tyre. I'm joined by a very special guest today, and actually my first ever guest on the podcast. She's a content creator over on TikTok, and she's also an aspiring journalist and F1 presenter. And she has over 22.7 thousand likes on her TikTok platform. It's Lizzie Lemon. How are you today, Lizzie?
well, I'm good, thanks. Thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be here and honoured to be the first guest.
It's so exciting, isn't it? I've been wanting to get guests for so long, wanted to get season one sorted, get myself out there, and then start profiling other people and getting other voices heard. So I want to dive right in. Your first TikTok was posted in 2023 and it was a video of you attending the Belgium Grand Prix. How did you get to that point? How did you become an F1 fan? And what made you think I'm going to put this on TikTok?
Oh, what a big question. So I've always been a Formula One fan. My dad is really into it. So from as honestly, like when people say as long as they can remember, like genuinely, as long as I can remember, I've been like the race was always on a Sunday. And as I got older, I just really got into it. I really loved it, and I've just carried that on. In terms of TikTok, so I have a couple other TikTok accounts that I really liked and I really enjoyed doing. But I started a master's in journalism in order to try and pursue my Formula One um, aspirations, I guess you could call them. And so I thought like you need a portfolio, you need to be able to show that you're like, bring things to job interviews. And it's just great practice to like work in social media, work out the algorithm, get some content out there, work out what people want to see, what people don't want to see. And just generally also it's so lush to like connect with other people who are also really, really into Formula One and like join that community. So there are a few reasons, but they were the main ones, I think.
Yeah, you mentioned your dad. I saw him appear in a very early TikTok on your account. Does he like was he up for that, or did you have to kind of force him to be on your
Oh,
account?
it's so funny because I took that video and my dad works in cybersecurity. So he is like, he's always been like, keep your accounts private. I'm not sure what he actually thinks about me, having a bit of a social media presence. But um I said he's such a sweetheart as well. I was like, oh dad, I've got this video of you. Like it's so iconic. Like it's what everyone was thinking at the Brazilian Grand Prix. My dad is like Southeast London's biggest like Mercedes fan ever, like Lewis all the way. And they were going really slowly. Yeah, so that was the video. And I said to dad, I was like, I've got this video of you, dad, but like I know you're not gonna want it anyway. I was like, for you, go on then, pop it up. So I did. And it was fun. Like everyone was like, lol, relatable content. So yeah.
Love it. Yeah, as a journalist, it's kind of impossible not to have that public social media presence, having your name out there. I feel like, especially because I'm 23, you're 24, we grew up very much in that age where it was like, don't put your photos online, don't put your name out there, don't post anything with your full name or any
Yeah.
details about your personal life. But it's impossible not to as a journalist.
Yeah, it really is. And I think like also I've always loved like making content. I think we also grew up in that era of like YouTubers. Like I was obsessed with Joe Sugg for an enormous amount of years. And like I think everyone like it almost was like that glamorized influencer life as well. So and I think I really like I didn't want the influencer life, but I liked the idea of being online and like I'm so extroverted. So like I think the idea of just connecting with people on TikTok, on Instagram, whatever. And also I'm also a professional dancer. So my work like necessitates me being online. So people could that is my portfolio, is my Instagram. So people finding me um and being able to follow me and having it all on public, like that is a key part of my work as well. So yeah, it was kind of unavoidable, but I also love it.
Absolutely. And I saw as well, you had a lot going on in 2023. Speaking of being a professional dancer, you were in an industry music video and you also got scouted by the BBC for some content as well. I was wondering, yeah, I wanted to delve into that as well, even though it's not motorsport related, it's still super interesting.
Thanks. Yeah, it was so bizarre. Like I think it's one of those things where like when you write it down in a list and it sounds really impressive and then I don't know, like when it actually happens it's just so odd. So the BBC thing really came out of nowhere. I was so I've got a different TikTok account, and I'm a Christian, so I like post kind of stuff about that, like faith. I mean, it's not all faith related, but like I mentioned it basically. And the BBC were producing a BBC Bite Size were producing like a religious festivals series on TikTok, on their TikTok and Instagram, to try and kind of like hit teenagers and like just inform them a little bit about like specific religious festivals. Anyway, they found that I did Christian content, and they just like the TikTok series was commissioned to a studio, and the studio reached out to me off the back of my content, and asked if I'd be keen to make 3 TikToks for BBC Bite Size channels about Christmas Day, Easter, and then the lesser known Pancake Day. Well, it is known, but I was like, I just think they're like 3 different caliber festivals, but so it made me laugh. But yeah, that's how that came about, and that was just straight into Instagram DM. And that was really cool. I'm so grateful for that opportunity, slash still can't quite believe that happened. And the industry music video, yeah, I am like I said, I'm a professional dancer. I mostly teach. I'm based in Bristol. But the I have like friends who are kind of further into the industry who are like full time. Basically, I'm just part time. And yeah, again, that was just through who you know. My friend was a choreographer, and um it was like a really last minute project. So yeah, they reached out and we did the music video, had a day on set, absolutely loved it. Put a camera in front of me, put a mic in front of me, and I am a happy gal. So yeah, that's that. Bit long, sorry, but there you go.
No, I love that. As kind of someone who is also, I did a master's in journalism. I don't know if many of my listeners actually know that because I don't speak about it that often. I finished it last year. I graduated in December. And obviously that's very full on. It's a lot. I did
Mm,
mine full time as well. It's a lot of work. It is.
yeah.
And then also you've got so many other kind of things going on. Do you struggle with that to kind of balance everything? Or because you are extroverted and I feel like you get your energy from being in front of a camera or from talking into a microphone. Does it actually energize you and make you feel good rather than making you feel exhausted, if that makes sense?
Yeah, that's such a good question because I think it's a bit of both. Like, ask my friends, and I think they'd say I have a freelancer mindset of like can't stop, won't stop. Like you don't know when your next paycheck's coming in, you don't know what work you might be offered next. And so part of it is like out of necessity. But then equally, like you say, I completely like get my energy from being in front of a camera, being in a dance class, like teaching people that I teach, like it's adults, and a lot of them become friends. So that's just so nice. Yeah, I think balancing it is definitely something I'm still working out. If you can hear that ambulance, I'm really sorry.
I actually can't.
You can't, you can't. Oh, fine. I live on a main
Can't.
road, so that's really impressive. Um, yeah, no, in terms of balancing it all, it's such you have to work it out as you go. Like 24, 23, we're so young. And you just, I think you are just always working out how you're balancing things. Um, but I think it really helps because I just love it all. Like, I really do. And I think like on the days where it's exhausting. One thing I would say though, I don't know if you find this, but like when you're doing something that's creative, when it becomes your job, it kind of puts a slightly different spin on it because often people for a lot of people creative outlets are like what they do in their free time, and they're feeling that they've got loads of ideas, and you know, or they're going to a dance class in the evening or an art class or whatever it is. Whereas for me, and perhaps you, if you're like writing and like having to produce things to deadline, um it can be really draining, I think, because you're like, I have to be creative now. Like I'm not feeling inspired. I'm not like, you know, it becomes like a task. And I think sometimes that's difficult.
No, I completely agree. I've had kind of a phase where I've been working for a magazine and now I'm moving into working in PR and I'm still going to keep the kind of writing, the journalism stuff going, but I'm thinking I'm going to keep it going just as a hobby, not as a paid venture, because I do just think when you put kind of a price tag on something, it completely changes your motivation and your
Yeah,
perspective with it. It's a bit like I
100%.
find it very much with things like reading. I love reading, but as soon as I was in English at school and someone put a book in front of me and said, you have to read this, I just didn't want, I was like, no. Even if it was a book that was actually interesting. I think almost being told to do something for a deadline just completely changes the way your brain thinks about
Yeah.
the task, if that makes
Oh, 100%. 100%. Like I especially feel it with like choreographing for dance.
sense.
Like I've got to teach 4 hours worth on a Sunday. So I need to have choreographed 3 pieces by then. And do you know what I mean? Yeah, like exactly like you say, you're like, oh flip, I need to do this regardless of whether I feel like it. I could be really drained. I could just want to sit and watch Modern Family and chill. But I can't because I've got to do this. So yeah, 100% agree with you. It's definitely a fine balance somewhere in there.
Definitely. Do you find it hard to turn your brain off and relax when you need to? Because you're kind of sat there like, okay, I've got this, and this that are all my responsibilities. And even sometimes, even when I feel like I need to relax, I know there's something I could be doing for one of those things that I have in my life. And I find it kind of hard to switch off and just be like, no, just turn on a TV show and do nothing for an evening. Do you find that as well? Or are you quite good at kind of switching that relaxation mode on?
No, I'm so bad. I'm exactly the same. It's so fun. Like even last night. So I'm one of those people that also I want to do everything. I really like struggle. I think I've got like I don't want to say I've got ADHD, but I've got suspected ADHD. So it's that kind of thing of like I just want all new things on the go at all times. And my friend and I have actually just launched a podcast yesterday, which is ironic.
Good
But
timing.
like I know. But yeah, we like as in last night, I was like sitting on the sofa and I was like, I so know that I should be doing absolutely nothing right now, but I just want to edit our next episode. And so I sat on Adobe Audition until like 11 p.m. just like editing, but that is still work. And then I just go to sleep and like my brain is still in like work mode. And like there's this thing, I don't know, I mean, I don't know how accurate this is because I did just see it on TikTok. So take it with a pinch of salt. However, I think there's kind of this thing, especially if you have ADHD traits, that instead of falling asleep, you just pass out. So for me, like I can't go to sleep without having something on, like whether it's a TV show or whatever. And then so instead of like just gradually falling asleep and relaxing into a state of sleep, you just kind of wait until your body is literally like, okay, I need to sleep now. And then you just like switch off. And I think that's kind of my and as I'm saying that out loud, I'm realizing that's really not good. I should be doing something.
As you're saying
It's
it out loud,
great.
I'm thinking this sounds like me. 'Cause I will put
Yeah.
on like podcasts or YouTube videos or anything while I'm
Yeah.
falling asleep. It's almost like I can't deal with the silence, which yeah, it does not sound great when you say it out loud, does it? But like I
No.
feel like my brain is so active and I feel like even though we're so young, obviously, we're like in our early 20s, but I have so many things that I want to do and I almost feel like I'm in a race with myself to get them all done when I've actually got hopefully quite a bit of time on this earth to do them all. But I'm
Yeah,
like
yeah,
in
yeah.
my brain, I'm like, I want them all now.
Yeah. It's hard. And especially with what we do as well, I think like you want organic growth and you want organic like interaction, especially with social media, like and even like with writing, you want people to be genuinely invested. You don't want that overnight success because it doesn't last and it comes with a whole host of issues that you'd much rather not have. So, but like it does, it's a game, it's a patience game, and I am not renowned for my patience.
Neither am I. Neither am I. I wanted to speak about the masters a little bit because we've touched on it, but I wanted to speak about it a little bit more. As I said, I also did magazine journalism specifically as a master's, and I saw your TikToks about media law. That was actually, I think that was how I found your profile, the media law TikToks.
So,
Um,
me
and I
having a
was like,
mental
yep,
breakdown. But
I was like, yep, I relate, follow. Um,
yeah.
yeah, I was just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about the masters, how it's going, which bits you're enjoying, which bits you're not enjoying so much.
Am I not enjoying? Let's just pick something at random. Media law. Nightmare. No, I'm joking. It's actually not that bad. I think I'm being a bit dramatic. I did well, I am dramatic. There's no doubt about it. I did an academic undergrad, so I did French as my undergrad. So I actually have been enjoying media law because it feels like the structure of like essays and exams feels quite familiar to me. And I know how to like writing academically, I finally got a hold of in like final year of a 4-year French degree. So I think like I like it for that reason. But it is a whole new way of thinking. Like I think I said in one of my TikToks, I'm not a legal girly. My brain does not work like that. I just go full send. I don't often stop to think. But it's been really interesting and really helpful. And I enjoy learning about like I enjoy sound like such a nerd, but I really am quite a nerd, closet nerd. And like learning about like copyright and all that sort of stuff. Like especially for as it kind of comes across my dance work as well. It really helps me know like kind of what is mine, what's not, what I can use, what I can't. And it's just so important if you want to go into journalism to have a good grasp of that. So it's hard, but I don't mind it. What do I love? I am surprised by how much I enjoyed radio. I think I would say to anybody, I don't know if you would agree with me, anybody considering a journalism master's to not go into it in a blasé way. It's it's a lot of work. It's a degree in a year. Do you know what I mean? I'm not quite sure what I was expecting. Like it's going to be intense, but it is a lot of work and it's a lot of out of your comfort zone early doors. Like I don't know if you had to be a reporter, but every Friday we have like a news day. So it's an assessed day like you have an industry. So it's great prep, but you come in at like 8:30. You're like finalizing your ideas. During the week, you're chasing interviews. You're trying to get like with all the proper equipment. You're trying to learn how to interview, you're trying to learn how to be a journalist all in one go. And then you come in and you have this day and someone's an editor, someone's a presenter, and you have this like big day in industry and it's so stressful. And like you have to just like email people and call people at the drop of a hat to try and get interviews. And they go, where is this going to be published? And you go, it's not, it's in-house because I'm a student and it's not going anywhere. And they don't talk to you. So I would say like it's been great and I think I've grown so much and I've learned so much in such a short space of time, but I would also say it has been extremely intense. One of the first things that ever happened to me was covering a story about breast cancer now, which is like a charity and they have a big week of fundraising. This was back in October and it like culminates on the Friday. So I was like, perfect, it's on the Friday, fantastic. Hadn't really understood what news was at that point. So I'm just calling like the breast cancer support charities in Bristol. And we're just told, like, I don't know if you got told this, but you have to call. You cannot email. No one replies to email. Journalists call. So I was like, fine, I'll call this charity. I emailed them first because I was trying to find a loophole, but they didn't reply. So I was like, right, okay. Called this charity. The phone, there's someone picked up, and the first thing I can hear is hospital monitors beeping. And I was like, oh no. And she was like, this poor woman, she was like, so like shaky on the phone. I was like, what is going on? And she goes, I'm sorry, I can't get interviewed. I've just had a heart attack. And I literally was like, I have no idea what to say in this situation. I was like, I'm so sorry. And like, I think after that, like, I think if that doesn't encapsulate like how quickly you can be like pushed out your comfort zone, having a great day, feeling like chasing a great story, immediately be humbled. Like, it's just such a roller coaster, of course. That was a very long answer, but there you go.
No, I relate to literally so much of that. It's crazy. I feel like I found mine quite emotional almost throughout my master's. Like, I just
Mm,
found it a very emotional experience. And I feel like I did psychology as my undergraduate degree. So again, it was quite academic. Again, took me about 3 years to learn how to write, how they wanted me to write, and everything like that. But I almost feel like I knew from very early on that I didn't want to work in psychology. So I was almost quite detached emotionally from results that I got in like essays and exams and things like that. I was quite detached from how it was all going because I wasn't that invested. Whereas obviously when you're studying something that you genuinely know you want a career in, you do care. Obviously, you care more about the results you're getting and things like that and how it's going. I feel like my brain just kind of switched. I've never felt like that about an academic course before, but I was wondering if
mm.
you kind of felt differently in any way when you were studying your undergraduate degree compared to studying the masters. Obviously, they're very different topics, but do you feel kind of like different mentally about them?
Oh, that is such a good question. And I actually find it the other way round, weirdly. So I think with my undergrad, I was at a Russell Group uni, which, not to say that like I don't think that means I'm better than anybody at all, but I think it means like there's a real mentality that comes with those kind of academic institutions where it's like every sacrifice it all for the grade. Like as soon as I started going, because my master's is at like the Bristol equivalent of like like UE. I don't know if you know it, like University of West England. Yeah, so it's like the more vocational university. And I found like from the get-go they were much more concerned with like my mental health, and like they had a very relaxed attitude compared to like what I was experienced at undergrad. And so when I was at undergrad, I think I literally ran myself into the ground because I wanted a first. And bear in mind, like I had a whole other life. I did the dance society, I was president of it. And I did comps with dance, and I had like this whole other thing, and I was doing like 18-hour days. This is what I mean by having absolutely no idea when to say no. Um, and so I literally ran myself into the ground to get a first, and I did get a first, but I think I really took that mentality on board. Whereas with this one, I think I know I want to get into the industry. And since doing my degree, I don't know if you found this, like especially my undergrad, not a single person cares if I got a first. I have never been asked, as long as you set like, if you say you've got a degree in something from a university, that's pretty much where the conversation starts and ends. Like just having that piece of paper gets you through the door, and from then on in, it's how you sell yourself and like what, as a kind of character, like what you bring. And so I think going into this one, I was like, I am paying a huge amount of money for the privilege of doing this master's, and I'm gonna enjoy it. I'm gonna like be okay with getting like a lower grade, but knowing that like I get to do things like do the podcast, and I get to like do fun stuff alongside it, and then not pin quite so much of my like identity, I think, on what I get. So I think that's really interesting that we've kind of had opposite experiences almost. Yeah.
Yeah, because I went to a Russell Group for my undergraduate as well. Um, but I feel like for some reason, even though there was all that pressure to get a first, I just threw myself into societies so much that that was kind of almost felt like my degree was a bit of a side hustle at times. Sorry,
Yeah.
University of Nottingham, if you're listening, but my psychology degree felt like a bit of a side hustle, and I was so focused on because I was on the committee for all of the journalism related societies, like the magazines, the radio, things like that. And I feel like I poured all my energy into those in order to get to the masters because I knew having that experience would help me with the masters. I do wish I went into the masters knowing that it was going to be a really challenging experience. I knew there was probably a lot that I was going to have to almost relearn because I'd learned it through the societies, but obviously that's not professional standard. That's just, I mean, at University of Nottingham, there's no journalism courses, so all of us really were just muddling our way through, like figuring it out. So I knew I was going to be humbled, but I think I
Mm.
almost wasn't, even though I knew that, I still wasn't 100% prepared for how much I was going to be humbled. Maybe.
It is. It's such a different skill. Like I love writing. I love writing essays. Again, closet nerd. But I just like, and then you get told how to write for radio, and it's basically like write like you're in year two, and you've got like the shortest sentences, and like you're trying to like get things across in a short amount of time with the most basic language. And it was just a whole like I had to rewind my brain, and like how at like academic undergrad I was like writing in these big flowery sentences about really stupidly complex like academic like topics, and then all of a sudden I was doing writing, yeah, really short. And so I think, yeah, it's a whole new skill set, and I have an unbelievable amount of respect for everybody and anybody who works in any journalistic industry, because it is intense, and it's a real skill. Like there wouldn't be a full masters in it, would there, if it was easy? But yeah, it's
Very
definitely opened my eyes, I think.
definitely. And obviously, you have been open on TikTok, especially that you want to go into motorsport journalism, presenting, etc. A lot of people are always like, how do you get into the industry and motorsport? How do you do that? I think there's a lot of people who really want to get into it, but they don't really know how. What kind of made you think I'm going to take the academic route to getting into it? I'm going to get the qualification. What kind of motivated you to go down that route rather than a different route into it? Because there are quite like a lot of people have got into it in such different ways.
Mm, yeah, it's true. I think there's not one right way. Like, do you know what I mean? And I think that there is this illusion that everyone had a good game plan and that things happened and you lined everything up and it all fitted into place perfectly. I think actually, I think most people who are into the industry would, everyone would have a different story, and I don't think there's one way. Basically, my story is a bit different in that I didn't know I wanted to get into motorsport when I went to uni. I was a mega Formula One fan, but I didn't consider it as a career option at the time. I just knew I loved languages. Closet nerd, part three. Knew I loved languages. I studied Russian as well for like 2 years. So I kind of was like in that mindset of like maybe working in crime. So it was all a big kind of like, I just didn't know. And then I got out and I worked for a year um, for the Bristol Sport Foundation, which is like Bristol Sport kind of is the big umbrella organization that owns like Bristol City, Bristol Rovers, like the sports teams, and they have a charity division. And like we went into schools and like taught kids PE, basically like specialized PE for primary school children. And that was kind of my test run to see if I wanted to be a teacher, because that was like another option for me. I love kids. And I decided that was a firm no. Just don't think I could do it. I have so much respect for teachers everywhere. Um, and then I just had like a real moment of like, right, I need to pick a career then, because I'm 23 at that point. I was like, I need to get on the career ladder. I live away from my parents, so I need to support myself full time. And then I thought, what is my absolute dream job? And I was like, right, I really love motorsport. I love presenting. I love being in front of a camera. I love talking to people. I'm so like inquisitive and extroverted. And I was like, if you asked me, I'd say I want to work in Formula One. Ideally, I'd like to be Naomi Schiff, but as a general like second option to that, just anywhere in Formula One, working like media and all that sort of stuff. And I was like, I'm so privileged where I'm in position to be able to do a master's. And I thought 1 year to like pursue something that I'm really into and would love to do. Like, basically, why not? And so, yeah, that was literally it. I was like, right, well, into the masters I go, which I think is why I had a slightly blasé attitude towards it, because I was just so excited, like a little puppy. And then it hit me, and I thought, oh yes, actually quite a lot of work, but a good lot of work, but yowza.
Obviously, you've said before earlier in this episode that the BBC noticed some of your content that wasn't Formula One related. But have you ever had anyone in the industry, any, famous people within F1, any media outlets notice your content and scout you to do any content for them at all?
So, famous people, no, not at all. I had a Formula One news outlet reach out to me off the back of my Formula One TikTok, um, kind of like saying, we've got this job that we're kind of, we're looking for someone to take up. Would you be interested? And I don't know, like logistically, how many people they would have spoken to or messaged, but I then emailed them off the back of that because that is very much something I was interested in. Sent them across my CV, went through the whole interview process, and ended up getting the role actually, which is Rogue. It was a real surprise, and I am really thankful and yeah, but predominantly surprised.
How has it been in that role so far? What have your experiences been like? Because I know they have quite a male dominated audience and quite a male dominated team as well in the past.
Yeah. It's I've really been enjoying it. It's social media is I'm a social media editor, and that is a whole new skill set, to be honest. It's obviously I've been present on social media for a few years, and I definitely know like what kind of works, especially on TikTok as a platform is probably the platform I know best, but also on Instagram. And so I've got the basic knowledge, but in terms of working out like which content does well, which content doesn't, what people want to see, that's been a real learning curve. It's been cool to use some like new software and stuff, and that's been great. The team are actually lovely. Like obviously, I mean, I'm gonna say they're lovely, but they genuinely are. Like they've been very understanding, very like it's been nice to feel like when you go into a new job, I don't know if you've ever had this, but like that kind of like transition period where you're trying to learn like basically how the whole team and system operates. So like, I don't know, like expectations, like learning new, like who do I talk to about this? Who do I speak to about that? That's been really great. In terms of like audience, yeah, like I mean, we all know that Formula One is its fan base is definitely the female fan base is massively grown over the last few years. But it's still very much male dominated. And so for me, it's been really interesting as a social media editor, like my analytics tell me that like I think it's 88% of the audience are male. And so like it's been really I've had to be really self-aware and like intentional about how I portray the content. And like what I mean by that is so like whereas for me, I love words, I love quotes, and like that's very much how my brain works. And generally speaking, obviously it's not a hard and fast rule, but generally I think women's brains often work like that, kind of a bit of drama, a bit of like let's really like break down what they've said, like what does that kind of imply. Whereas I think for men, often it's like the facts and the figures and like the most simple format possible or visual format. So like a bar chart, pie graph. You can tell I only did maths up to a certain point. A pie chart, a bar graph. Is that a thing? A bar graph? Or is it a bar chart? Okay.
No,
What's going on?
we know what you
What
mean.
is it? We all know what I mean. Yeah, so that those things and like so at first I was kind of dramatizing it a bit and I found that that content didn't do so well. And I think and then I've kind of changed it to kind of just pure facts and presenting it in a more visual way and that's did so much better. So I think it's been really interesting to kind of like have to like kind of sideline what I would want to see because I only ever really created content for like predominantly female audiences. So like trying to shift that and work to it, but also bring something of like my own style, which is what they saw on my TikTok account that they really liked, and trying to find a middle ground between that has been yeah, really fun. And obviously like reporting Formula One and like keeping on top of all the stories and like that is like what I want to do. So it's just been really cool. And I feel very grateful that I get to do it.
That's awesome. Yeah, because I was really intrigued about that because, as you said, your TikTok account, your own personal one where you post your Formula One content, is very intended for a female audience. I mean, the username even says it's for girls. So, yeah, like
Yeah.
adapting the content to be suitable for an audience that obviously they've already built up an audience of thousands of followers, but they are following it for the platform, not for you as much. They've not followed it with you in mind. Whereas your own TikTok account, obviously, they have seen your profile, they have seen you as a presenter, and they have chosen to follow you. With your own personal TikTok account, what do you think it was about your content that made them think, yes, this is someone who we want representing our brand to our followers we've already got, if that makes sense?
Oh, another great question. Um, I mean, it's really hard. I mean, we're British, so complimenting myself is not exactly my strong suit. But I would say, I think to a degree, authenticity. I think I'm not like, I really struggle to kind of present. You have to present a professional version of yourself, but you still have to bring in that kind of like I don't know, like a bit of humor. Like I don't like to present things in like a really cute and like facty way. I'd rather like bring a bit of personality in with it. So I think partly that. I think well, what they said to me was like creativity with kind of how I was presenting information. Um, yeah, and like kind of awareness of TikTok trends and about what does well on social media. Um, yeah, I don't know. It's really hard. I think one thing I'm really conscious of whether this influenced what like their desire to have me like join them or not. I don't know, but I am obviously we both did MA journalism, and although I'm not on TikTok to like have it as a purely journalistic outlet and like journalism as I would do if I was preparing a package for like radio or TV or something, I think I'm aware of what I'm posting and like making sure that even if it is kind of like taking the mick out of like I don't know Charles Leclerc's like Vegas suit or something. Like if I'm doing that, then it's still like I think putting boundaries as to what I'm posting. So like one thing I speak to people about quite a lot is like not just putting any content about um like I try not to objectify the drivers that much. I try to like report on what's happened and like, you know, take my take on it, and it can be funny and it can be like taking the mick a little bit, but I try to like keep a boundary between my like full opinion. Do you know what I mean? I feel like it's a fine line. Like I'm not articulating it very well, but yeah, I think having in mind that your TikTok in Formula One, if you've got aspiring journalist or aspiring F1 content creator or something in your bio, that therefore your TikTok is your portfolio. Where if your aim is to be scouted via TikTok, which absolutely does happen, and I would say that I've got like 300 followers. Like it's not, and I've only been posting since like when was it, October, I think, or maybe not even. So it's not been long at all. And like it doesn't, you don't need to have a big account, but I think if you've got that in your bio, then just being aware of like what your content is and posting things that are like they don't have to be like really like clinical and like newsy, but like just knowing where the line is in terms of what's news and what's like kind of trivializing it a bit too much. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. Obviously, on my TikTok, I cover a lot of feeder series stuff. So a
Mm.
lot of the drivers, I'm obviously 23, as a lot of the drivers are quite a bit younger than me. And I have seen people objectifying those drivers, people who are the same age as the drivers who I'm speaking about. I've seen a lot of people kind of objectifying them, talking about their appearance, their relationships, things like that. But obviously, firstly, they are underage, so it's inappropriate anyway, but particularly as someone who is a bit older as well, being in my 20s, I feel the same way about there definitely needs to be a boundary in place in my case, obviously, when I'm talking about feeder series drivers, but even just in Formula One sense as well, I do think it's important if you do want to pursue motorsport in a professional sense to have that boundary in place. I always think, how would I feel if a driver or a team or someone who works in motorsport saw my videos? That's kind of how I go about it. Would I be embarrassed or would I be proud that they'd seen what I created? Because I think when it's a portfolio in that sense, you should, like, if someone was to notice your content, obviously, as you said, like no one famous has seen yours. I've had a couple of feeder series drivers interact with mine. Like no one in F1 or like that side of things, mainly because I don't really speak about F1 that much on my TikTok. But I think it's about knowing that it is your portfolio and people can see your content who are outside of your circle, outside of your followers. Because obviously with TikTok's For You page, it very much like it can get boosted to anyone. So I think, yeah, it's kind of being aware of that in a sense is like the best advice that I give to someone. As you said, it's really hard to talk about though, and it's really hard to put it
Mm.
into words, I think. But I think you did a very, very good job with that.
Thanks. I felt like it was a bit rambling, but yeah, it's just I think like I've said this again before, but like there's so many people that are like 15, like 14, 15, who are like aspiring to it. And honestly, it makes me so happy because like that's never something I thought I could do as a 14, 15-year-old. Like I said to you, it didn't even occur to me until like in the last year, which, you know, as someone who is always, I love all sport. Like I'm a sporty person myself. And I just think sport brings people together. It's such a cool community and like everyone gets into it and it's just sick overall. So the fact I never even thought I could do it, like I think it's really cool that there are 14, 15-year-olds on TikTok who are like have that in mind. But I just think also like at that age, why would you be thinking about like, oh, you just don't have an awareness of, or necessarily, not everyone, I'm sure people do, but like just generally, like if you don't have someone telling you, like I don't think it's something that would have occurred to me at age 15 or 14 to like not like, I don't know, talk about like I don't know, you know, I'm think of an example, like make a thirst trap of like Lando Norris or something. Because also ultimately it's hard because that's the stuff that does well on the algorithm. Because when you're getting people that interact with that, especially people that aren't in the kind of are on Formula One TikTok, but not for the journalistic stuff, just for the like little memes and like all that sort of stuff. That is the stuff that does well. And it's really hard to like, it takes a lot of discipline and like so say sacrifice, that sounds quite dramatic, but like it just takes a lot of discipline to not put content out there that you know will do well because you're trying to like maintain some kind of like we say some boundary. but I think like, yeah, I would love to, for like, if that was me and I was 14, I think I'd need someone to tell me that. So hopefully maybe at least one person will hear this and be like, oh yeah, good shout.
Yeah, because I just don't think it's spoken about that much. And sometimes, as you say, like it is tempting sometimes to put content out there that you know is going to be relatable and you know is going to hit the right audience and hit the targets in terms of views and gaining followers, likes, etc. Sometimes I feel like, oh my goodness, I'm so old and so unrelatable because I do more content that is more serious and more like I tend to avoid speculation unless it's speculation or who's going to get this seat. But speculation about their personal lives and things like that, I tend to avoid. And sometimes I just feel, oh, I'm not relatable enough. I'm not Gen Z enough, like kind of feelings when I see other people's content. So I think it is important to talk about it and to have that conversation out there so that, yeah, as you said, it's so great that so many aspiring journalists and aspiring presenters are popping up on the platform. At 14, I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. So, yeah. And you mentioned as well that you're a fan of other sports as well. So I really wanted to touch on that because I saw you mention that in a TikTok as well, particularly women's sport. And obviously, we've been speaking about F1 so far, which is obviously at the moment, it's 20 men in the sport. But yeah, I want to hear you talk more about women's sport and all the other sports that you're interested in.
Oh golly, how long have you got? I've always, I think, been I love sport, like I said, from a young age. And then when I did my undergrad degree, like I say, closet nerd, and a lot of my modules that I did were around feminism and like feminist theory, whether that be in like films or I don't know what age your listeners are, but excuse me. Um, but the like when I did my degree, I did the French side, like which was all the language stuff, and then you have your cultural side. So you get to pick modules that basically look at different like forms of culture, so like art, politics, sociology, like anything basically, really, but in a French context. And so I got really into that, and when I did my dis, I could write basically on what I wanted, and I got to write. Well, I chose to write on like French sportswomen and like how that came about and like why sport has until very recently and continues to be really a very male dominated industry. Yeah, like it's just really piqued my interest. There's a lot of reasons why. I think like a big thing for me is that um I mean, sport for men and like sportsmen has like the idea has existed since ancient Greece. Like obviously the Olympics started then, and that's always been something that men were involved with. But in France, especially, and I think that trend kind of like also accounts for the rest of the West. Like women only got to become like sports women, as we would understand it, as like a career and a profession since like the early 1900s, and even then that was like the beginning of the movement. So I think there's like it's so important to me to support women's sport because it's so relatively new and the concept is still like historically speaking really really new. And even like obviously women's football has come on leaps and bounds. I personally am obsessed with Mary Earps, can't get enough. But
I'm from Nottingham,
and I've
so
been
shout out Mary Ups because she's from the same city as me. So big up.
oh my days, what a win. I saw her play recently at Ashton Gate in the Man City versus Bristol City match, and I was like 4 rows behind the goal, and she was obviously in goal, and I lost my marbles entirely. Yeah. So, anyways, like it's really cool to have seen like women's football come through. Especially I worked in schools, like I said, for a year, and like seeing little girls, like when the World Cup was on over the summer, like girls were coming in their kits, like with like bronze and like Erps written on the back and like seeing what that it like them and like so many girls coming to me being like I want to be like Lucy Bronze when I'm older. Like it's so cool to see what it's doing, but also it accounts for 80% of women's sports that are watched in the UK. So like obviously football and like you have to celebrate successes because it's a hard world out there, but there's still so much that needs coverage. Um yeah, and I could talk about it for ages. I think like one thing that really intrigued me, and I think for some people it's helpful to understand why, like factually, why like sport is male dominated, and like something that I found really interesting, closet nerd part 9, is that the like in obviously the 20th century in the 1900s there were the wars and sport was very much like a paramilitary like activity for men, so like they basically used it to train up for war. And so when it, and then that was very much not women's role in society. Like they were wife, mother, you know, all that good stuff. Well, all that role, uniquely that role, basically. And so when men were like, women started coming into this role, it wasn't that like men were like, oh no, we don't want that, but it was hard. It was always been a source of identity for men, and like to kind of confirm their masculinity. And like, this is like obviously a big generalization, but that was a massive trend. So then when women started coming through, like there was, even in France, there was like medical controlling of the female body, where like if that she went to the doctors, they would like actively recommend to not do sport because it would like damage women's like grace and elegance, and like, and I quote, be a threat to like their reproductive organs. So like they were just dissuaded on a medical level from doing sport. And it was just like such a, like it's been such a gear shift, which I think is why like, but also that's so recent. Like the Second World War ended in 1945. So I just think it's really important that people are educated about it and continue to like support women's sport. And that includes in motorsport, like F1 Academy. And like recently, I mean, I don't know if you already spoke about this, but like with Susie Wolf, like that whole thing where like she was accused. And I just, you know, it's all a matter of opinion. But to me, like, of course, like the woman who has done arguably the most for women's motorsport in the last like 10 years and is the face of female motorsport, actually, most of it, obviously, when she gets a controversy and when something's kind of gone a bit askew, it's on the basis that she's Toto Wolff's wife. I was like, if she's going to be cancelled for something, let it be for like something she's done in relation to like the academy or, something like that. But I just thought that was just such a sign of like how far we have to go, because she's done so much amazing stuff. And like someone's gone, oh, you're married to Toto. Have you been telling him secrets? And you just think, for flip's sake, like
It's crazy, isn't it? It's absolutely, it's bonkers. I can't believe, like, I just can't believe the whole situation unfolded the way that it did. And the next section of the podcast, I was going to ask some quick fire questions about your current opinions on things that are happening in motorsport and some more general motorsport related topics. And my first one on the list was actually F1 Academy, just as a series, as a whole. Do you think it's achieving what it needs to achieve? Do you think it's good? Do you think it's bad? Like, what are your overall opinions on F1 Academy?
I think anything that gives women visibility in a field that's like dominated by men is a good thing. I think it's great that it's getting more visibility. I think people like Bianca Bustamante, like whatever you think about her, like kind of like I think the whole idea of having women in motorsport is improving because, and a lot of that is largely due to F1 Academy and that getting more, I mean, coverage. I think, yeah. Oh, I think that there's so many opinions about it, but fundamentally, yeah, if something's propagating having women in motorsport and it's been set up specifically for that and to enable women to get into like that needs to like they're not getting into Formula One for a multitude of reasons. And so like, you know, it's not the ideal scenario. I think to have ideally they'd be able to compete in Formula One and in the lower formulas with the men. But fundamentally, if that's not something that's achievable in the immediate future and that's something that's going to have to change over time, then the academy is a brilliant thing. And I think Susie Wolf and all the team behind it are like, it's just incredible. And just, yeah, really inspiring actually for women who like watch motorsport and just like for young girls to see people that are doing something. Like, if you don't see people doing something, then you just don't think you can do it that you identify with. So, yeah, slightly rambly, but that's my opinion.
No, I completely agree. I think a lot of people's criticism of it is, oh, well, these drivers aren't going to make it to F1. They might not. Sure, the drivers who are in F1 Academy right now might not make it, but maybe a 4-year-old girl will see F1 Academy and she will want to go karting because of it. I think down the line, I think it's like, yeah, maybe the drivers who are in it now might not get to F1, but I'm sure they'll still have successful racing careers regardless. And then they will inspire like people, the younger girls who aren't even of the age to do karting yet, aren't going to think they can do it if they don't see women at that level doing it. So I think it all
Absolutely.
evens out.
Yeah, and
Absolutely
also
right.
there was like a study that was done as well. Sorry to cut you off, but like as in most women who got somewhere in motorsport, like historically, almost in every case, there was like an academic study done. They were only introduced to it because they had a parent who was in it, and that was always their father. So like that's where like that's people's route in. So I think if anything, like you say, provides inspiration and like proves to girls that they can do it, they'd be way more inclined to go into it if they weren't like predisposed by that like social setup.
Absolutely. I completely agree. F1 Academy, good. That's the overall review. The down to the tire Lizzie Lemon review of F1 Academy. My next one is Andretti being rejected from Formula One.
Oh, I think it's um oh, I think it's overall quite embarrassing for the FIA. That's my general opinion, mainly because they actually said yes. They were fine with letting Andretti in, and it was the commercial rights holders of Formula One, I believe, that said no because he wouldn't bring enough competition. He wouldn't actually bring. Imagine being told you're not going to bring enough value to a sport. That is absolutely savage. But it makes the FIA look awful because it reinstates that idea that they're just concerned with money and like the Americanization, quote unquote, of Formula One. Um, and yeah, I mean, there's a lot of chat thrown about like that America's a big population, and if you look at the size of it compared to Europe, we need to cater for that. And like, but there's also the argument that it's the money, that's where the money is. And yeah, I think predominantly my thoughts are for the FIA to say that it's okay, and for someone else in Formula One who, again, like commercial rights holders, like they're concerned with money, they're concerned with the business side of F1, but yet they were like, maybe not. I think that's quite embarrassing.
Also telling Andretti that they're not going to be competitive when they are a top team in Formula E, current Formula E world champions, and a regular top team in IndyCar. So it's like, okay, if they're not going to be competitive, who is?
Yeah, true.
Bonkers. My next one is all of the interesting, strange team names for 2024. Visa Cash App RB, Stake F1 team. I know there's a bit of, we don't know what's Stake F1 team. It's literally just been announced that they're in a bit of legal trouble for being called Stake because of the fact that it's a gambling brand. But anyway, yeah, your thoughts on those team names?
Oh, I think they sound ridiculous. If I'm honest, I think they sound absolutely insane. I'm gonna have to refer to Visa Cash App RB as VCARB for the rest of the season. And it's hard, isn't it? Because money has to come from somewhere, and they are lower teams. And fundamentally, that if you know if that's the way they're going to survive and stay in F1, then part of me thinks, well, you got to do what you got to do. Um, but then again, I think, well, so many thoughts. I think like there's always been a history actually of having like F1 sponsors in the team names. Like, I mean, Red Bull as a key example. Like, that is their whole team name. So maybe we need to just get on board with it and stop complaining. But also, I do think like I don't think stakes that bad. I mean, obviously, like you say, it's a bit controversial because they're a gambling company, and it's a pain in the bum because there's like tracks on the calendar that don't allow gambling to be advertised. So when they go, they've got to be like Kick Sauber. So it's logistically a bit of a pain. But I think Visa Cash App RB is just taking it to another level.
I agree. Absolutely. And on the topic of Visa Cash App RB, which I haven't actually in all my previous episodes, I've been like, I don't know what to call this. Like, I'm not calling it that. Like, I think V card might be the way. I just want it to be Toro Rosso. But anyway, my next question is, do you think Red Bull should actually be able to own that second team? Do you think that's fair? Obviously, they've had it for years now, but it has like kind of resurfaced. Like, oh, we don't think Red Bull should have a second team. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
That's a good question. To be honest, it's not something I've massively thought about or engaged with. I know that like as a team, they're really keen on kind of separating themselves from being the sister team of Red Bull. They want to be like appreciated as a team in their own right. And so if that's I don't quite understand if that's their business goal and like everyone's saying that they don't want them to be associated with Red Bull or like have a second team, then maybe, you know, maybe that there's something to be done there because that seems like they're on the same page. Well, the fans and the team are on the same page. But there's so much going on behind the scenes in F1 that you don't see. Contracts, money, like commitments. There's just so much, and I think as a fan, it's hard for me to like say comprehensively whether they should have a second team or not because I don't know what that would look like if they weren't associated. Would the carb even be allowed to be in F1 or would it be possible? And then will we lose a team and then you have conversations about whether that's like the pros and cons, cost benefit of losing a team over them not being associated with Red Bull. I think it's a hard one.
My next quickfire question is, what are your thoughts on Lewis Hamilton going to Ferrari for 2025?
Predominantly shock. Like when I woke up to that news, it was actually I'd given myself the first line I've had in about 4 months because of like deadlines and stuff. And then I woke up at like 11 to like a million messages from my boss and like not a million, but like as they messages from my boss, my friends, from everyone, and I was like, what the heck is happening? Do you know what? Like it's sad. I think it's as British people, I think, especially, we've become very attached to the idea of like double Brits at Mercedes. And obviously, Lewis won all his titles, bar like one with McLaren at Mercedes. So, like, I think that's right. Yeah. So yeah, I think like that is it's definitely an end of an era. And obviously with that comes like quite a lot of sadness. And I think people are gutted and whatever. And his relationship with Toto and even with Bono, although whether Bono will come with him or not, we don't know. But yeah, anyway, so it's sad. But I think also like when Lewis made the jump from McLaren to Mercedes, everyone was literally like, what are you doing? You fool. Like you're a McLaren person through and through. And then obviously it turned out to be an absolute gold mine of a career move. So it just it's hard to say, isn't it? I think I feel so unbelievably sorry for Sainz. I think that is absolutely brutal. Poor bloke is an quality driver and he's just been punted out, or what feels like punted out anyway. Yeah, well, we'll just see. I think it'll be interesting. It's the biggest news F1's seen in years, I'd say. So, I think what's really weird is they've announced it before 2024 season. Like that confuses me entirely, and I can't quite work out why they do that. Because now everyone's got really like, and like, well, all sorts of opinions on him going to Ferrari, but he's going to be at Mercedes for 2024 and racing for Mercedes and working with Toto and with Bono and with George and all the rest of it. So yeah, mixed feelings, but we'll see.
It's a really weird one. I feel like if Mercedes was still at the top, I don't think he'd be doing it. But I think he's kind of thought, well, probably not going to win another championship with Mercedes at this rate. Might as well. I feel like
Mm,
he mentioned like ages ago, like I read that he wanted to go to like race for Ferrari at some point in his career. So he's probably
mm,
thinking, right, well, nothing to lose, might as well do it now. But, I mean,
yeah,
he's 39. In my head, he's still like 34. I don't know, like
that is
my
wild.
brain just
Yeah.
can't compute that Lewis Hamilton is 39 years old now. But obviously,
I
yeah,
don't
when
think
he's
I knew that.
it's so weird. Like in my head, I'm like, yeah, 35. And it's like, no, he's 39. It's like, wow. But yeah, I feel like he's got nothing to lose really. And I mean,
No,
do you
I
think
think
he's gonna win a championship at Ferrari? That's another question.
I think it's like you just have to wait and see like how they perform this season. I mean, they had a decent-ish car at the start of last season, like when they first started, and like them and Aston Martin, everybody was like, "Hello, what's going on here?" And then, I mean, strategically, we all know they're all over the gaff. They need to make some better strategic decisions. So yeah, we'll see. I honestly I can't call it, I don't think. I think the thing is with Lewis is that he has one of the most, if not the most loyal fan base in F1, maybe Max slightly more so, but I think he's one of the only drivers where he could move and he will bring all of his fans with him to Ferrari. Like the Tifosi is gonna like quadruple in size. Um, and I think it's a huge win for Ferrari. I don't think anyone's really talking about that, but that is an absolute win and a half. He's also taking a pay cut, I think, which I think says a lot about potentially his confidence in Mercedes going forward. and therefore slightly concerning for every Mercedes fan. But yeah, we'll see.
This is another bonus question. Who do you think is going to take his seat at Mercedes? Where do you think Sainz is going to go for 2025?
Oh, poor old Sainz. Yeah, great question. Once again, I would love to see Alex Albon try a top team again. I think his time at Red Bull was brutal. I mean, everyone has their opinions, but I think that car is made for Max Verstappen. They went through second drivers like there's no tomorrow, and Alex was just a casualty of that. So I think that would be really nice. I don't think it's going to be Mick Schumacher. I've seen a lot of that on social media. But you've got Antonelli coming up through F2. And I think that's if he keeps going at the rate he's going. I mean, he's only 17, I think. So, give him a couple years, maybe not next year. Well, maybe next year, I guess. But he's definitely on my radar. Um, yeah, I've seen a lot on social media. I don't think it'll be Alonso. I think he's too close to retirement. Um, I don't think it'll be Ocon. Just don't think he's a reliable enough former. Bit savage, sorry, Ocon. Yeah, I reckon my candidates would be Albon or Antonelli, I think.
Honestly, that's what I've been saying. I've been saying if it's someone currently on the grid, Albon. If it's someone stepping up, Frederick Vesti is one that hasn't been mentioned a lot by the media. I don't know,
Mm,
the media have kind of snubbing him. But obviously he came second in F2 last year and he's a Mercedes
mm,
junior. But I feel like if Antonelli wins F2 this year, they can't really ignore him anymore, even
no.
though he's so young. And they could do a Max
Mm.
Verstappen with Antonelli, which would be pretty cool. Where do you think Sainz is going to go for 2025 as well?
I just so want him to go to a good team. Like, I think, it depends on what Alonso does. I don't know when his contract ends. There's so many contracts ending at the end of this year. So if Alonso's one of them, I think there's a lot of, I don't think it's a bad year for Sainz to be booted out of the team on that front because there will be so many like uncertainties. Um, yeah, I don't know. I don't think it'll be a straight swap to Mercedes. I think first of all, if you have Science and George, who are you putting as your number one driver? Like, that's a difficult question. Um, I don't know. Maybe if Alonso goes, Aston Martin. Maybe it depends how the teams perform this year as well. Like, yeah, if by some small miracle stake have a good year, like their car launch was ballsy and very like new era. Like, watch out, we're Stake F1, got a new car, we're gonna be banging. Maybe it's all so much like hypothetical, isn't it? Like so many hypotheses because you just don't know who's going to go where. But I just want him to stay in the sport. Poor guy.
See, my prediction is that he's going to go to stake. That's my prediction with
You
signs,
think?
and I think it's because when Audi step in 2026, Carlos's dad has a lot of Audi connections in the rally world, and I feel like he could go to stake for 2025, even though Audi aren't stepping in until 2026. That's what I'm predicting. My next one is you mentioned the livery launches. My next one is what are your thoughts on the liveries that have been announced and we've seen so far for 2024?
Mixed. I think. I mean, yesterday we had Williams and Stake both launched. Not yesterday, day before. Yeah, day before. Launched both their liveries on the same day. I think that was really interesting because you had Williams who did a very like classic launch. I mean, it's modern insofar as, you've got some electronic music in the background on their Instagram and all that sort of thing. But other than that, it was like, I think the tagline was like, history in the making or something. So kind of really bringing, I think, obviously they've got a massive history as a team, and just like really playing homage to that and like just revealed the car straight away, no nonsense in New York. And then just talked about the philosophies after. And then you had Stake, who have quite literally gone completely the opposite way. Their video on Instagram was like Star Trekky. It was like they had like this spaceship and like sound effects of like mechanical sounds, and like it was in some kind of weird space. It was like very Matrix sci-fi vibes. Plus, obviously, the luminous green color scheme they've got going on, and like they're very much like new era. And so I think it's actually really interesting because I feel like it's quite a finely, like almost small scale representation of like F1, like the divide in F1, you know, between like people who are like really like attached to the history of it and really want to like honor the culture and the kind of European history, I guess, of of the sport, and those that are pushing it into like the flashy, commercialized, slightly more Americanized, quote unquote, like post Drive to Survive Formula One. And I think even within the car launches, we've seen that. My personal feeling on the stake one is that it is an abomination. I cannot, very strong word, isn't it? Maybe it's not an abomination, but the luminous green is, I'm not a fan personally. I prefer the like, I think as someone who's watched it growing up, I think maybe I'm attached to the kind of like simplicity, like the sport, the racing, the engines, the team, like more that than like the commercial side of it, and therefore would prefer the Williams-esque release.
Awesome. My final quickfire question is, can you make a bold prediction for the 2024 season, whether it's related to drivers' championship, constructors, someone you think is going to get on the podium, someone you think is going to win a race, just a bold prediction?
Um, I'm just gonna have to go with the first thing that comes into my head. Norris, top three drivers' championship.
I like. I like it a lot. I made a video a few months ago where I did bold predictions and I said they're going to swap Ricardo and Perez in the summer break. I don't even know if I back that one myself, but I said it and it's out there. And that video started suddenly gaining views again. So yeah, a lot of people have probably heard that now, but that was my bold prediction. I also think Alex Albon podium. Fingers crossed.
Please. Oh, I love Alex Albon. Please.
They're my bold predictions. Well, thank you so much. My last question for you is, if anyone wants to go and follow you after listening to this episode, they want to support your content, where can they do so?
Blimey, there's a list. So F1 TikTok is it's F1 underscore for the gals, but the four is a actual number four, and gals is with an A and an S. I post Formula One content on there. Yep. I am on Instagram, it's lizzie.lemonx. I don't post Formula One content on there, but that's my Instagram. And then if you're after more sports content, I kind of mentioned this earlier. I don't know if you like, this isn't promo because it's literally been launched yesterday and it's got about 50 followers. But me and my course mate have just launched a women's sport podcast. So that's called Sidelined, and that is available on Spotify. And our Instagram for that is Sidelined Podcast, I think. And then on Instagram, on X, sorry, it's Sidelined underscore pod. Yeah, that's probably it.
Awesome. Well, they will all be linked in the description so people can go and find you. Thank you so much for joining me today, my first guest. How
Oh,
exciting.
thank you so much.
And thank you to everyone who has listened as well. You can find me at Down to the Tyre on all social media. And stay tuned because I'm now doing episodes weekly every Sunday at 10 a.m. So see you then. And